Hello and welcome to the Death of Football. I'm joined today by three fantastic guests as we talk about Arsenal's game against Fulham for a very small amount of time before we then go on to talk about the crux of course, all of the Arsenal discussion and football discussion of the last day and a bit that's dropped since the announcement. Just from a selfish personal point of view, genuinely has been a really kind of awful 24 hours because it happening in the first place, the announcement happening, a couple of shows, of course, I'm sure a lot of you have seen now as well. And then having to work through the day. I mean, if I had to type the words European Super League one more time into an article, I may have screamed. It got to that stage where every single one of the 8 articles that went out today, every single one of them was about the Super League. It's just, yeah. And now I get to talk about it for an hour and a half. Well, we're going to in probably about 10 minutes' time. But first of all, let me introduce to you my guest today. First of all, it's been a little bit of a while, but Tom, glad to have you back on the show, mate. Are you doing well?
Yeah, really well. Good to see all the boys again. And I was actually hoping for a quiet night so we could just talk about the league, but sod's law.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, of course, that everyone now on the regulars sign up for these shows typically, and Tom signs up for the show thinking it's going to be a nice quiet chat about Fulham, completely unaware that, of course, this is going to then happen. Adam, always a pleasure, mate. How have you spent your last day? Has it been stressful? Has it been calming? Have you been avoiding it? What have you been doing?
I've been embracing it. I've been trying to not have one side or the other.
Been hugging officials is all you've been doing.
Yeah, you've been doing that. Taking in all the information, seeing what's going on.
Getting a little bit of, I mean, you sound like a Dalek. It's gone to that stage now, Adam. Your connection is pretty dreadful. There, you're gonna, you might have to sort something out. I'll let you sort something out, and you can come back in a second. You might just need to refresh it. I don't know, but something needs to change. Drew. I really appreciate you coming back on the show, mate. It's a ridiculous amount of time. I'm glad to see you here and back. But this is a great topic to talk about, a really cheerful subject. We had a lot of discussions on socials over the last 24 hours and in the group chat as well. But how are you feeling?
Well, it's a cheerful subject, so clearly that's why I'm back on. So it's all connected. No, I mean, I'm doing well otherwise. A bit better now. Weather's good outside, so just trying to embrace melting into a chocolate puddle every day for the next 5 months. So.
Yes, I can imagine it's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter every single day. Let's start with the game, because of course the whole point of the TGT podcast, for those that aren't aware, is that we usually do these a day after the league games so we can discuss the league games. We're going to do that very briefly, and then we're going to get into the meat and gravy of what actually has really kind of happened. Adam, I'll start with you, mate. Fulham at home, we scored 7 goals in 2 matches ahead of this match. We rotate quite heavily, and we get a very kind of Arsenal 2021 or 2020-2021 kind of display.
Yeah, I just want to check first of all, is my connection better?
It sounds like I can hear you fine. We'll see how it goes.
I think, like you say, it was a typical Arsenal 2021 performance. You would expect, with the kind of form that Fulham have had this season, Arsenal would be able to beat them. You would expect that even with rotations, considering the fact that we've been in, dare I say, quite good form the past couple of days, past couple of games, we would have been able to beat Fulham comfortably. But it just never seems to work out that simply. This game of football that we all love is subject to change quite often, and I think it's a bit of a shame for me, because I think we were beginning to build up a nice head of steam into the business end of the season, and it kind of looks like it's been derailed by a whole range of things. But I'm glad Nketiah got a goal, and I guess that's probably the only positive I can take from it.
Yeah, Yeah, that's fair enough, mate. I completely understand. It's a positive to take from the game that we scored. I thought it was one of those classic Arsenal games of this season where we've dominated it. We've made a lot of chances that we should have scored. We didn't. They get one penalty, score the penalty, and then we're in deep water at this point, and we should have come out with a much better result. The meltdown then that follows was cataclysmic, and that was before we even found out about the news that we've been talking about for the last 24 hours as well, as you expect from Arsenal these days. Drew, were you surprised by the performance, or was it a case of, no, we've seen this time and time again this season, and then once again we see it yet again?
I think I'm not surprised, but I think over in our last 6, we've now dropped points to Fulham and Burnley, and both of them are 17th and 18th in the table. So how shocked can we really maybe be? But I think it's more of the fact that you can look at it and just say, I think Arteta to a large extent, and I think most of the players as well, I think all their eyes are on Europa League. I think everyone's now fully on board, rightly or wrongly, with the fact that the only way forward, at least the rest of the season, is we have to win Europa League. Not that it necessarily matters now, but we'll come into that later. But I think that was the mentality going into that match. It's, eggs in one basket. Mathematically, we're still in it domestically, but realistically, so many things have to happen for us to get, top 6. Top 7, I would avoid, because I don't want to have that Europa Conference nonsense. That's just a whole other disaster waiting to happen. But I think that was reflected in the performance, and for me, it just it still shows that we're still too Jekyll and Hyde in terms of how we perform on the pitch from week to week to really consider ourselves worthy of a higher place in the table. So I mean, I'm disappointed, but I'm not shocked either, and I think most of us could say that across the vast majority of the season, really, if you really think about it. So just trying to keep it simple, moving it forward. But yeah, no, I'm not terribly shocked, and you could say they absolutely got lucky for the penalty, but again, when you look at our performance, we shouldn't have to be saying things like that. We should be beating Fulham comfortably at home. Even with rotation, even with some of the changes we were forced to make, that's all irrelevant to me, sort of. So there's still work to be done. So yeah, we'll move on and take it from there.
Tom, final kind of thing that we're going to talk about with Fulham is just kind of where this now sits us in the league, which I know is tricky to talk about considering the situation of everything. But it was an opportunity for Arsenal, had we have beaten Fulham and then beaten Everton, to go above Everton in the league at that point. And obviously Everton and Spurs dropping points themselves. We've seen other teams drop points. And it seems that this season, when the pressure's been on and Arsenal have been tasked with picking up points where other teams have dropped them, they haven't done that, and they haven't taken those key opportunities. I also thought that kind of linked in terms of a mentality issue with the way that, and I know that Nketiah has not played much football and it's his first goal for a long time, but the celebrations from a draw at home against Fulham in the last minute, where there's still time left to grab the ball and run to the halfway line, it really bothered me. The celebrations, it really bothered me. And I know a lot of people turned around and was like, look, I think you're reading a bit too into it. I think it's not as bad as you think. But for me, that in itself encompassed kind of a mentality issue that we've seen at Arsenal for a long, long time. The fact that they're that lacking of will to win and realising the context of the situation. But what did you think about that side of the game?
Look, I think, look, this is what Arsenal are. This is where we are at the moment. I think we had to rotate and from the Europa League, because we've obviously put all of our eggs into that basket. If we played our full strength team and a couple of extra players got injured, obviously Lacazette got injured, but a couple of players got injured and say we won 2-1, would probably be all over the manager. So at some point you do have to prioritize. So I don't really have any issues with him rotating. And let's be honest, we do have a middle of the table kind of squad. So, and there are no easy games in the Premiership. So if we put out our first team, our best strength team, and we play the right players in the right positions and the tactics on point, we'll probably win that game. But we have to choose. And the manager chose and he paid the price. So it's unfortunate, but it's the team that we have now.
Of course, chat box, welcome. Hello to everyone that is tuning in for today's show. I know that we're not going to be discussing the Fulham game really much more than that, and there are reasons for that. I'm also going to change the layout as well, because I kind of want this discussion to be more of an open playing field for everybody to have kind of their thought and discussion displayed. It's, if people feel like they want to jump in and have a discussion and want to argue a point, I think we're open to that as well. The idea of a Super League, which has now been, which is being attempted to be ratified and attempting to be brought to the table, and to the point where the table is now being shaken about with these 12 teams, and they're trying to get more teams on board, and other teams are just turning around and saying no. At this point, I mean, the latest information, if you aren't aware, if you've been living under a rock, is that you know who the 12 teams are, but now the likes of Bayern Munich, RB Leipzig, Dortmund, and all of the other German sides have basically said no. There's still questions around French teams, because the Super League effectively wants a couple of French teams to be involved, and it puts the PSG in a very difficult situation themselves. And who else that other second French team is, how they earn that place, if it's on merit, and if it's on history and stature. You'd probably look to a Marseille, who competitively, in comparison to Monaco and Lille and Lyon this season, are way off the pace, quite similar to how we might be looked upon in the Premier League too. So there's really big issues. There's also discussions around how all of the nations pretty much that are being left out, the likes of Turkey, Portuguese clubs, are shunning this completely, putting out statements, and all of the governing bodies, and I'm talking about the kind of the FA and La Liga and the Premier League and the DFB and all of these organizations, both national and league-based, are completely against this idea. And of course, on top of that, you've then had a press conference from UEFA, where Serefin has basically turned around and said that there's a lot of snakes, which he didn't hold back at all, which fair play to the guy for doing that. And by the way, a little bit of trivia, I believe this is right, in that he is actually Andrea Agnelli's daughter's godfather, which is quite incredible. If you've not, if you didn't know that, there's a weird link there. They were rather quite close as people, and now it seems that relationship is pretty dead. And it seems that the main guy, as we expect these days to be, is Florentino Perez, is the main kind of figurehead behind this. He's the president of the organization, or whatever you want to call it. And then there are, yes, so we can call him that, the Godfather. And then there are a number of kind of, should we call them generals, I suppose, underneath, like Andrea Agnelli, for instance, that are involved in this. Stan Kroenke was rumoured to be one of the vice presidents. He's not, from the far as I'm aware. He's not one of those. He's basically just on the board, from all I'm aware of. But it means now that we're in a situation where there is utter... It's not... I mean, someone really put it really well on social media, that it's not civil war, it's all-out nuclear war in regards to football right now. It goes beyond civil war at this stage. I want to get an initial reaction from you, obviously, about this. And I also want to get kind of your view on if you think that it will happen in the end. If you feel like it is going to go ahead, whether you think that eventually the forces that be, the resistance to it will be too great and it won't be able to take place, and the legal side of things will come into play, or the players will have something to do with it. Drew, we'll start with you, and then we'll get people just piling in, and feel free to have your say. So, Drew, off you go, mate.
I mean, no, I'm not surprised. I think maybe some of us are surprised at the timing, but I think if you ask me if this happened 5 years from now, I would say that's probably about right. I think we've all kind of seen the breadcrumbs about this. It was always going to trend in that direction. There's so much money in football, and eventually, you know, you have statements and things like billionaires' boys clubs for a reason. Like, they want it to be exclusive, right? So I can understand maybe from a certain aspect of some of the financial parts of it. I think maybe that's where Adam's coming from as well. I think if you are a billionaire and your whole idea about owning a football club or any sports franchise is about, you know, the success on the pitch or on the field or on the ice or whatever supersedes the fact that you look at it as an investment and you want to make as much money as possible, this is exactly the route you would be taking. That doesn't mean I agree with it. It means I'm not surprised by it. You know, you can look at a lot of certain aspects of a lot of the American sports, North American sports, and see kind of that same thing. You know, you see why the whole reason why KSC moved the St. Louis Rams back to LA is because there's more money in LA for them to make long term as a sports franchise. There just is. You know, they have their new stadium with that stadium comes rights that aren't just about the Rams, it's about anything. Even maybe linked to this. That's a whole other discussion which we can go on to later. But there's reasons why things like this happen. So, no, I'm not surprised. I think certain mitigating factors made this happen now. I think COVID is a big issue. I think the fact that we haven't had fans at matches, really, I think a lot of the owners maybe could have sat there and said, not the fact that we're losing money, but just the fact that they might feel they don't really need fans. Really, and if they do need fans, because football is such a global game, so many people are still going to watch those clubs play, irrespective of fans not being there at the ground. 60,000 fans at the Emirates does not trump however many hundreds of thousands or millions of people watching an Arsenal match on TV, which still make more money from long term. So for me, this is it's strictly about money. And I know they were talking about that on Sky earlier. It's nothing other than just finances. And the thing for me that I think a lot of people need to recognize is the clubs would not have gone through with this if they didn't feel they had a very good chance, if not an iron tight chance, to have this go through, for the money to be there for them to be making. They wouldn't have taken the risk if they really genuinely felt that this wouldn't be working. I think that's what people have to pay attention to. Most businessmen at that level don't make those kind of decisions if it's not going to come off well, because the backlash, if it doesn't come off well, it's the fact of the loan that they took out to make this happen, these kind of things. So that loan means that loan has to be repaid. So if this didn't come off, they're all up the creek. They have to now repay back a loan with a league that didn't end up coming off and existing. So there's so many parts to this that have to be guarantees or near guarantees for them to have taken this risk, which means that they feel like the risk was a good one, which means that they're convinced it's going to work. So I do think it is going to work. I think it might not be 100% how they envisioned it. Maybe they'll only get 90%, 85%. But I think for me, the one more thing I took away, and then let's get Adam and Tom to come in as well, is that I think this could be a precursor to something bigger. And we talked about this on the TGT WhatsApp group, that you look at things like everyone questioned why Qatar got the World Cup. Like no one understood it. Between the time of the year, the fact that they didn't have infrastructure, they had to build everything from scratch. You could look at the fact that if the Super League comes off well, and if their whole plan to expand it is to not have it be something instead of Champions League, but have it be its own actual league, completely disconnected from other leagues. If that's the actual end game plan, you can have certain things like, the fact that we were testing matches at neutral venues because of COVID could have made the owners see, maybe if we make this a global thing and have teams start playing at venues around the world, there's even more money to be made from that. So I think this is kind of almost a precursor to that. And this could be 10 to 20 years away, obviously, but I think things like this could be an actual thing. I think football's too global for this to be just a localized thing. I think that's kind of where my head is at with everything right now.
Oh, go on, Adam. I know you wanted to jump in on this.
Yeah, no, I think Drew's spitting facts. Although I have to say, I don't necessarily think I'm surprised by the timing of it. I think COVID has impacted clubs' finances massively. Clubs have been hemorrhaging money. Real Madrid are in it's certainly hundreds of millions of pounds of debt or euros.
Barcelona are 1 billion euros plus.
Arsenal are in a huge amount of debt. Barcelona the same. So I look at this and I'm hearing the figures that are mooted in part of it, and I'm thinking, well, if I were them, it would be a no-brainer. I'd consider doing this same thing as well. But I do believe that I think Drew mentioned, is it going to happen? Or you asked, is it going to happen? I think if it doesn't, then UEFA and all of the other clubs need to take a real long, hard look at themselves, because I don't see how you can keep bending over backwards. I don't see how you can keep allowing these concessions to be made for people that are always dangling the carrot of, oh, we're going to leave unless you give us X. I don't see how that's a sustainable way to run any kind of organization or franchise. So they have that to consider. But one point I kind of considered today is that of all of the teams who are meant to be in the European Super League, I feel like the fans of Arsenal that are against it will have a very important role to play. And the reason I think that is because all the other teams, maybe bar Tottenham, have sporting success or have had sporting success in the past couple of years. Arsenal, on the other hand, haven't really. So I think there's a kind of interesting dynamic there to say, well, this is purely a commercial thing. Whereas the fans of other clubs could say, well, at least there's sporting success. We want to see the best of the best play the best of the rest. But Arsenal don't have that claim, and they can't make that justification. So I think there's a little thing there to consider as well. And I don't know how I feel about it, if I'm being brutally honest with you. I think if done in the right way, it could be a great advert for football. But because I know that the reasons for it are purely commercial, I don't think it's going to work out that way at all.
Tom, Adam's raised a decent point there in the saying, and kind of looking at the other perspective of it, is that it could be really good for Arsenal. Like without thinking about it from the way I'm continuously, that's always going around in my head over and over again. If I ignore my instincts for a second, it could be really good for Arsenal in the fact that we're not in the Champions League. We're pretty far away from the Champions League, other than if we were to get a surprise win in the Europa League this season. But in the context of the league, we are very far off being a top 4 team, in my opinion. And it's going to take a long time, naturally, for Arsenal to earn that. So from a purely selfish financial point of view, from the owner's perspective and from the club's executive perspective, it could be very beneficial for them, because as we talk about the fees that are involved, the €300 million plus joining fee or joining reward, as it's being described as, for joining that is going to be hugely beneficial for Arsenal. And if you think about the fact that the likes of Leicester, West Ham have looked to overtake Arsenal this season, there are other clubs like Wolves and Everton and Aston Villa that are pretty much catching, and if not, I've already caught them as well, that this will separate them. And this is also a case of there's no risk of ever falling out of that competition. So do you see the point of view that from a financial, from a business perspective, it's an unbelievable opportunity for Arsenal?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm as you know, I'm an economist in my background, so I always look at it from an economic point of view. So I just want to quote quickly Swiss Ramble. You probably saw his tweet earlier in the day when he talked about I'm just looking at it now, the 2019-2020 total debt of the 12 founding clubs. It's totaled to £7.4 billion of debt, right? So when I look at it from, let's not talk about economically or rather than footballistically, I mean, this is a travesty, right? There's because you've got potentially a successful business owned by some of the shrewdest investors and billionaires in the world, and we are not, from an economic standpoint, capitalizing on the potential revenues and profits of these clubs. So if you have £7.4 billion of debt between these 12 clubs, there's inefficiency somewhere. Something is not working. And because we've gone from the pre-Premier League era, which was kind of much more meritocracy, to the extreme now, which is basically almost free market capitalism, it's only normal that the markets will squeeze out the inefficiencies in the market, right? So the market is correcting itself. So you've got these massive clubs, like, you know, we know Real Madrid, Barcelona have hundreds of millions of followers around the world. If they're charging £1, $1, $10 a month subscription, they'll be earning hundreds of millions a year, which they're not currently earning from this current model. So as a pure business, if you're looking at it, you're coming in objectively and saying, hold on, we have this many followers, we have fans in Asia, in Africa, Australia, the US, and we're having to share our pot of money with all these clubs across Europe and all these clubs in our domestic league. Yet we still need to pay all this extra money to keep up with the Joneses. So with the PSGs and the Cities, for example, the business model just doesn't balance up. And I think that the issue is that, yes, you have some owners, despite being oligarchs, who do it for more than just the money, right? Let's say Roman Abramovich, right? There's always been a glory aspect to it, that he obviously loves football, goes to all the games, wants to see his team do well. But then you have the other owners, more so the American owners, who look at it as from an investment point of view. And so you look at it, what's the biggest blocking point to them making all these potential additional revenues? UEFA. So why don't we get rid of UEFA? We don't need them. So if they bypass UEFA, now they have direct access to negotiate from a smaller pond of players to a huge global audience, and there can be now a direct sale of basically the commodity, which are the football clubs, to the customers. So you're just fully unlocking the capitalistic potential of the football business as a whole. So from an economic point of view, it's a smart move, and it's a natural one that would happen in any free market, right? It's like venture capitalists in America in the 1980s, right? You see inefficiencies, you jump in, you shake things up, you make billions of dollars, and you move on. They don't really care about the fans and the smaller teams and the lower leagues. No one cares about that. And because we've opened up football to billionaires, to royal families, to oligarchs, to hedge funds,
States.
I mean, this is states. Yeah, I mean, it's only natural that the market will correct itself, because it does not make sense that these 12 clubs have 7.4 billion of debt. And you look at the American clubs, I don't think the top 12 clubs there have 7.4 billion of debt. So from that point of view, I totally understand why they're doing this. From a football point of view, obviously it's terrible, but I think it's not just something which happened overnight. I think it's been years in the making. And I think today is really like the final straw. And now everyone's seeing that maybe football wasn't always about football. Even though you look at the four clubs in the Champions League semi-finals and look at their finances, then, I mean, we could have probably told you that already. So for me, this is just a natural evolution of where football is heading.
I mean, to come off the back of that, I think football hasn't been about football since the Premier League came into existence. Since the early '90s, it hasn't been. I think a lot of fans, they might have seen like the numbers that Tom was talking about, or just looking at it from like the business angle. So many people don't understand that angle, so they can't possibly look at it from that context. But I think for me, the kind of the biggest key is, if you look at it, I think we're all sort of maybe unanimously against the formation of it as football fans. But from an Arsenal standpoint, from their ownership, if this is going to go forward, that we kind of expect it will, from their standpoint, is they have to be in it. And Tom mentioned unlocking, but obviously using it in a different example. There are still so many fans around the world globally that have not been tapped into yet as a source of revenue for big football clubs. Think of it this way: the US alone has 320 million people in it. Obviously you can then subtract people who don't know what they're watching on TV. So you subtract any person up to the age of, I don't know, 4 or whatever, just for numbers' sake. And then the elderly usually don't, unless they're already passionate about something. They don't usually give their time to it. So you're still looking at like an untapped overall potential viewership base that even if you spread it across it, it's something like 200 million people that can watch football in this country alone. And then you have the fact that Liverpool have American owners, Arsenal have American owners, United have the Glazers, and they're based in the US, obviously. So you already have 3 of the founding 12 clubs have a vested interest in trying to grow the sport in the United States, and in this country, clubs and franchises make so much money from TV, from any number of things. So for example, and Tom brought up the point about, if you take just the example, if you charge 100 million fans £2 a year or whatever, it's X however many dollars, right? So in the US here, you can only watch certain teams if you have access to their channel in certain markets. So for example, I'm from New York, right? So I'm a huge New York Rangers fan. When I was in New York, I could watch Rangers games without a problem because I had access to MSG, or I could just go to the Garden to watch a Rangers game. The second I was no longer there, I then had to pay X amount of dollars more per month to be able to watch Rangers games, or else I couldn't watch it. And there's a lot of people globally that are more than willing to pay that money if they can watch their club play or their team play or whatever it is. And they know that. And this is what I'm saying. And that's why you've been seeing maybe a change in the wind about how you watch matches in the UK now. How it's been drip fed over and over, but this is the way moving forward. Right. And I think that's kind of why I brought it back to, I don't know if local matches are going to be as much of a thing anymore, which is why you're seeing these little tiny things pop up here and little breadcrumbs that all sort of it's leading us to something a little bit different. So, and
just like
go on.
Just quickly, I think again, I'm not trying to jump on the Super League bandwagon, although Arsenal are in it. But
we made it. We're there.
No, but I just wanted to say that I think as someone who's like lived abroad, obviously I'm from London, but I lived in Europe for several years, and I lived in Africa for 5 years. I think UK fans really struggle to understand just how big the game is. And we kind of seem to have this arrogance that, oh, because we go to games, and oh, I grew up in North London, I live down the road from the stadium, I somehow deserve Arsenal more than some kid in South Africa or a kid in Indonesia. But believe you me, those kids around the world love Arsenal with this same passion as we do. Yeah. And they didn't even grow up here. I mean, I kind of fell into Arsenal because I grew up in the area. But these kids really love Arsenal. So it's we don't have a monopoly over the heart and soul of Arsenal. We are a global club. We've got fans all over the world. And as Drew said, if it means maybe we play a couple of regular league games in the States or in Asia or somewhere in Africa, just think about just the appeal, that how much that could grow. So it's no longer like a village team full of miners or guys who work at the munitions factory. It's so much more than that. And I feel like it's almost having to accept that the game has grown beyond N5, right? We're not just Arsenal as a small North London club. We are much, much bigger than that.
I agree. And I think if you look at, you can look at it in a broader context. If you look at how human history has worked out, human history, the way society has been built, has a strong way, largely from tribalism a long time ago. There's still elements of tribalism there in everyday society, but the large entities of it are no longer that way. And if they are, they're larger tribes, right? Football is still very tribal to the very local level, which is why you still have people following clubs that are 15th down the league football ladder, but so I think that's where a lot of Arsenal fans come from. There's still that tribalism attachment. And so they feel like if you're not from our tribe, well, I didn't give you permission to come into it, so I don't accept you. And that's why you still have that sort of local fan versus foreign fan debate that still exists for whatever reason. And I think it's ignorant because, as you say, football's always been global, and now it's even more so that. And again, ownership knows that, and they don't care if someone who is from North London no longer can go to an Arsenal match if they're making 5 times the money from another fan from somewhere else. That's more than willing to pay for it. That's all that's going to matter to them. And that's what I keep trying to tell people, is that football is business. And when I looked at this and I looked at it in depth, and I'm not an economist by background, like my major was in history and political science. So I come at a lot of things from that angle. But the fact is, like, I see this as like a very hostile business takeover of football. And that's exactly how it's been played out. It was very quiet behind the scenes. The people who knew it was coming, and they didn't need to warn you because they'll be fine without you. That's their lens. If they come at it from that angle, that's how you know it's going to end up working out. They don't care that it's not going to work out for some other people because it's going to work out for them. So
very quickly, just before Adam goes in, just let me read out this super chat very quickly, and Adam's going to come in. The real Janice says, are they going to turn our football clubs into sporting franchises? Football is based off the historical achievements, and the European Super League means that none of that matters anymore. I think that's Janice. It's a thing we're going to come on to a little bit later on, talking about sports franchises. So don't worry, we will get there. We will talk about that. Adam, I know you're desperate to have your say on this, so go for it, fella.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think the worrying thing is that, as Drew and Tom have said, it was something that was coming from such a long time, but I almost feel like I didn't see it. It was hiding in plain sight. A lot of the fact that the games were being played in different places, we didn't have fans for such a long time. It was there for me to see, but I feel like the idea has been planted in my mind, and I just didn't take notice of the signs that were there in the first place. And I feel naive. I feel like I've been naive. I feel like I've done something silly for not sort of making noise about it far sooner than it happened. But yeah, I think as I said, these guys have already touched on it. The game has gone global now, and I don't know what that means to be a fan anymore. I don't know how you show your support for Arsenal anymore, because it's no longer. you can't take pride in saying, yeah, I've got a season ticket, I'm going to go every single year. Does the way this league is going to set up, does it lend itself to matches being played in different countries? Does it lend itself to the league being moved elsewhere and the stadium just being, I don't know, used as a venue for Brazil to play their matches in or something, or another venue for Westlife to have a concert at or something like that? I don't know. So yeah, I think it raises so many more questions that obviously we can't answer yet, but we're going to do our absolute best to. But yeah, I think for me, it's worrying that these things have happened. I didn't see it coming, and they can change it at the drop of a hat. So what's next? What else can they change? Money's clearly talking.
Money is clearly, obviously, we know that's the driving factor. We know that is the main reason behind all of this change. And to play devil's advocate to it again, what Tomo, and I know you got a lot of appreciation for what you were saying in the chat box earlier on, because you were 100% spot on in that point of view in saying, look, at the end of the day, like, these clubs have been utterly screwed over at times by UEFA, by FIFA, by TV broadcasting companies, time and time again. The reason that they're in debt is quite a lot in part down to what they have had done to them by those authorities. I saw someone tweeted me an amazing picture that I want to share with you guys as well. And it was an interesting picture. It was Balaji on Twitter that sent me this. Let me just share my screen with you and you'll be able to see it as well. It's really good. But see if you can notice the thing that I noticed. He was like, this is a great picture. And I was like, it is. But do you notice the main difference? Have a look at this picture. It should be on your screen now. I'm hoping that you can see it. You might have to zoom in a little bit. Let me throw it up on the full screen, then you might be able to see it easier. There you go. So it says, this is the perfect picture to explain the current situation. UEFA is the main culprit. If they were fair, this Super League would not have existed. And I mean, the difference between the top and the second picture, for me, the main thing I notice in this is the disappearance of the children. That is the main difference between the two. Is that you can no longer see the kids in the picture, and the kids.
Oh, that's very deep, bro.
I know, but the kids are us. It's really deep, but it's a great picture, and it really makes a lot of sense because whilst in the first picture, the clubs have been having to hand all of this money to UEFA and giving back to the guys that are restricting them, and we as fans are getting this tiny small piece of the action where we're slightly cared about. In the next image, where they then take control, we don't matter anymore. All of the money goes towards them. Everything goes towards that.
It's also the size of the pie. The pie is bigger, and they're sharing less. Or they're sharing
pizza, Drew.
Yeah,
the pizza.
No, we call it a pizza. We call it a pizza pie.
I know you call it a pie, but it's a pizza.
the pizza has gotten bigger, and now instead of sharing a bigger piece of it with the same global audience, they're now just keeping it for themselves. Which is the whole point. Which just goes back to what we were just saying before. It's all about maximizing that untapped profit and pocketing it for that global elite that we were discussing about the Billionaires Boys Club, kind of what I mentioned. So yeah, no, but very deep comment. Sometimes you do know what you're talking about.
It's only taken a few tactical breakdowns to get. Drew, let me come to you about what Janice was saying earlier about the sporting franchises, about the idea that we could pick up this club, move it somewhere else, and it be situated. Because we've talked about, as Adam highlighted there, we don't matter anymore. The local fan, or as what some people described it from a source, the legacy fans no longer matter. It doesn't matter if we go to games. The pandemic has proven that fans are not necessary in stadiums anymore. Football can continue without fans in the grounds. It doesn't matter whether you've got 60,000 local people travelling from the local area and, of course, around the UK and from abroad to go to the Emirates to watch Arsenal. But we're not needed anymore. And the idea that we've seen not just games, but whole clubs, whole sports franchises in other sports move cities. Stan Kroenke, we know very well with the LA Rams, the St. Louis Rams. But we also see it in football already. La Liga has played games in the Middle East, La Liga games. Sorry, not La Liga, the Super Cup games. The Spanish Super Cup game was moved, I believe, to the Middle East. La Liga matches were being negotiated to be moved elsewhere around the world, and it was an absolute outrage. And it's always including one of the big Spanish sides, Barca, Atleti, or Real Madrid, and usually not together, usually with one of the smaller sides. And it's typically, ironically, it was not the the big side losing a home game. It was one of the smaller teams, your Cadiz, your Espanyol, your Getafes, these sides, losing their home game to get it played abroad so they could watch Barcelona still play an away game, but in a different country. Now, what is your kind of feeling around the idea and the reality and the likelihood of a sports franchise becoming real so that Arsenal's league games or the Super League games could be picked up and taken to a whole different continent?
I think it's going to be incredibly likely, and I think that's kind of what I mean. And I mentioned it in the WhatsApp group before. Tom mentioned it on the show. I'm pretty sure Adam's probably already had similar thoughts because he's mirrored the same sentiments. But it would not surprise me if the whole reason why Qatar was nominated as the host of the World Cup is because I think Qatar is going to play a vital role in what's about to happen moving forward.
Are you saying Qatar? You are, aren't you?
Yeah, we say Qatar. So
pizza pie and cutters.
And
I mean,
Qatar, yeah.
a cutter for your pizza. Oh, go on. Sorry, that was bad. Go on.
But yeah, that's actually pretty decent. Actually, I'm surprised. There you go. Very good.
There you go.
So yeah, I would not surprise me because you have so many nations that do have the infrastructure available that can sustain neutral venues being de facto home venues for clubs that could easily just move. Like if you look in the United States, we have the most 100,000 plus capacity stadiums in the world because you factor in NFL stadiums that exist, college stadiums that exist. I can't even tell you how many we have. You have Kroenke building the new stadium in LA, and I think as much as I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt over the years, much to my stress level, because with the discussions about it, that's why part of me genuinely thinks that I think he dug his heels into Arsenal for a very long time because I think he knew about this from ground level, and I think he wanted to be a part of it, and I think that's why he was willing to go through the things that he's gone through because the potential financial gains of being a part of this. It speaks for itself from a business standpoint. That goes back to what Tom said. So I do think, and you see it in other sports. Well, the NHL started to play preseason games in other countries. NBA goes to other countries, goes to abroad. They go to Africa. They go to Asia to play games. They go to South America to play games. NFL Europe, they tried that, but then now the NFL started to play at London Stadium,
Wembley.
Yeah, 1 or 2 games a year. They started to play. Yeah, exactly. So you're seeing it in other sports trying the same idea bit by bit over time of getting people exposed to the idea that athletics and sports in general, not just football, but sports in general, are going to end up being a global thing somewhere down the line in human history. It's not just going to be localized to particular countries. I know that's looking way down the line. It might even be in our lifetime. I don't know. But football being the true global game was always going to be the one to headline it if it was to come to that, and I think it's going to come to that. I think we're already seeing some of the things that it's going to be used to that. So I don't think it's going to be because Kroenke's moved franchises before, and moving franchises is normal in the US. You usually move a franchise because you want to make more money, and when franchises lose money year on year on year, then a lot of the pundits are asking, well, why hasn't this franchise moved? So I know a lot of people don't follow the NHL that are going to be in the chat, but one prime example is that there's a team called the Phoenix Coyotes. They've lost money every year since they came into existence into the NHL. For over 20 years, they've made a deficit in their books every single season. Instead of moving the franchise, the NHL has paid off their debts and kept them there because they want to try to make a franchise in that part of the country work. But an owner can come in and say, listen, this is like a money sinkhole. I want to move it to a more profitable fan base where there's more fans, they're more willing to watch hockey. People in the desert don't care about hockey, so why is there a hockey team there in the first place? So then they could theoretically move them. So it would not surprise me if, depending on what goes on with this thing, say there's such a backlash with just Arsenal from an Arsenal standpoint perspective, that say we get kicked out of the Premier League, players don't want to come here because they can't play for XYZ. I don't know if there's anything necessarily stopping Kroenke from saying, well, we're just going to move Arsenal and now we're going to play our home games in LA because we just built a stadium there that is a larger capacity than, the Emirates. They already have that infrastructure in place to make that move almost overnight, in theory. So it would not, and you could have another club do the same thing. Like if things go south with, say, Real Madrid, they could just move to Qatar or Qatar, or you know what I mean? Like that could happen because that infrastructure is now in place once the World Cup exists and goes off there. You have stadiums there for what reason? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I know it might sound slightly tinfoil, but I think all of these things. I'm not a fan of coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences, especially in this instance. I think things kind of line up on multiple fronts too much for it to just be like a one-off thing with this. Do you know what I mean? Like, to me, it just seems like all the ducks are starting to get into a row. And whether it happens in a couple of years or a decade or whatever it is, I do think that we're heading down a different path. And the entity of like football as we know it currently, I think it's going to be wildly different in 5-10 years time. So.
Tom, what do you think about Janice's super chat there? It says the difference is that sporting franchises in the US have been built off the investors that built the league. The football clubs started off locally as the local social clubs, which have then been invested, in some words, you might want to use the word invaded, I suppose, by these investors from across the world, and have then built up these clubs to these varying levels of size across the world, I suppose. So do you think that we can draw comparisons between how it might affect our standing in terms of a franchise moving abroad, or do you think the fact that there is ties more ingrained within the culture of the UK, specifically for the English clubs, that could stop that from happening? Or is it regardless? Does it matter whatsoever? It doesn't matter.
Well, I think it's part. I think it does matter, but I think that's part of the appeal of the Premiership, right? And about English football, it's the home of football. I mean, England, or shall I say Britain, is very good marketing itself in the arts, music, film, sports. You know, we kind of, we're punching above our weight in a lot of these things. So I think that's the legacy is, for example, in China, when people are, eating or importing certain types of food, middle class people in China will eat something which is more expensive because it's from England or from Europe, because there's that kind of
Westernization.
Exactly, which kind of creates a kind of an inflated value of what you're consuming. So I'm not saying Arsenal are overinflated, but actually we probably are overinflated given our recent performances. But we do have a legacy. We are from London. We're playing like shit, but I mean, on paper we look really good, right? So that's part of it. So we're selling the idea of Arsenal, the city, the country, the swag, the fans, the brilliant players we've had in the past. So there's value in that, and we're just not capitalizing on it. Let's be honest. And look where we are right now. Like, look at the way the league format is and the way things are. From a purely business perspective, it's not working. So I totally see that. Yes, that as investors, yeah, I mean, they do have a say, and ultimately our custodian sold the club to them. So it's a little bit late for us to kind of have a whinge and a moan, because we had a chance before, and we, as fans, we didn't really come together like the Liverpool fans did, and look where we are now. So, and this kind of goes on to another point, that I feel like UEFA and FIFA are basically greedy buggers anyway, and they had a chance to kind of pull back from the pure capitalist direction that we're heading with FFP. And Arsenal and the Emirates and everything we did at the end of the Wenger era, the second half, was built around FFP. And what happened to FFP? Right? Basically. So, I mean, I think as fans, I think we sold out, we did this. Well, actually, no one really protected our interest. We tried to play by the rules, right? We didn't throw a load of dirty oil money or royal kind of sovereign fund money into the club and inflate prices and do all the stuff that some of our competitors have. We did it the right way, the Bayern Munich model, and look where it got us. We're 10th in the league, right? So I think
if you want to call it the Bayern Munich model, I mean, they did it a lot better if that's the case.
Yeah. But essentially we tried to do it the right way, let's be honest, right? And you still got City, you still got PSG, you've still got Chelsea, and it's not working. So I feel like they could have corrected the game. FFP, and I mean UEFA could have put more provisions in place to stop. I mean, when you saw guys like Neymar and Mbappe go for over 200 million, you could already see that something was, come on, like this is not sustainable. And so what do they do to control that? Absolutely nothing, right? They tried and they backed down. And I feel like,
yeah, it was City, wasn't it? Yeah,
exactly. And I feel like these European bureaucrats who are running UEFA don't realize that they're really dancing with the devils, right? They are playing with some very, very strong, wealthy men, some of the most powerful people in the world, and who they think they can control. And I think they've just basically had a real slap in the face with the reality that they don't have the power they think they did. They don't have the control they want to exert over the rich clubs. And these guys are basically taking control of their assets and their destiny. So I don't blame them for doing that, but I think if the fans should be angry with anybody, it really should be UEFA. And what UEFA's, for me, what they've chosen to do over the last years is try and make more money for themselves. More useless games. They're creating, obviously, the Europa Conference League, expanding the Champions League. Is that to improve the quality of the competition? No, it's to make more money. So these guys are just basically going to do it better than them, and they're not involved. So, I mean, who should we really be angry at here, right?
I get what you're saying. I'm not going to lie. I'm angry, Tom. I'm still angry. I don't know. You make a great point. I don't know who I'm meant to be angry at, but I'm still angry.
I mean, UEFA shouldn't. It should have been FFP. FFP should have stopped all of this from happening, right? But they didn't. And look at the debts.
It is. It's Adam. Go on. I know you're jumping.
I feel super conflicted. I don't know if the emotion I'm feeling is anger. I don't know if I'm feeling happy. I can see that there is, for want of a better word, corruption in UEFA and probably to a lesser extent in the FA. But I've seen some dodgy decisions in games. Someone put a video of Van Persie getting a red card for kicking the ball away, and I just think about that type of stuff. I've seen dodgy decisions. I've seen Barcelona be in crazy amounts of debt, but still sign some of the best players. We know that this is happening, but I still don't know if I feel happy that Arsenal are part of this thing, and I still don't know if I want this to be the way to stick it to UEFA, because they can get on their moral high horse and say, see, this is so bad. And they have no right to do that. They have no right to do that at all. But this gives them that opportunity to do it. And I don't want to be in bed with UEFA or Sepp Blatter or Serifit, because they are the bad guys as well. The sheer fact that Sky Sports have put Monday Night Football free to air today just tells you everything you need to know. These people are disgusting. They're horrible, horrible people. But as bad as I feel about that, it's great for Arsenal to be in the same conversation as Real Madrid and Barcelona. I honestly don't know.
I hear what you're saying. I get it. I understand it. And I think also there's a frustration around kind of like, we've been out of this for so long that this the golden egg, the golden egg we're being like tempted with. It is tempting. And I was trying to point out yesterday, and again, it's very, very easy, I feel, for people to completely misquote and misunderstand your intentions with when you say stuff like this. But I pointed out yesterday to a lot of people on the show, and I said, look, if this is going to happen, Arsenal, and in capital letters, must be involved. For the benefit of the club, they have to be involved. So it's all well and good, like being critical of this, but the fact of the matter is that they have to be involved in this. Now, I don't want it to happen. That's my standard reaction to the idea of a Super League. That's my stance. I don't want a Super League. I don't want it to happen. I want things to stay as they are. I would the Champions League format, the Champions League as a competition, that in itself is something that I was dreaming of Arsenal one day picking up and lifting. I'm never going to see that now from the looks of things and the way things are going. It's never going to happen. Never going to see it in our lifetime. It may never have happened in my lifetime anyway, but there's no more chance of that happening. And that's a really sad thing. But the point of it is that now we're in a situation where the soul of the game dies, because even the league, like people talk about, oh, they're not going to kick us out of the league. And I don't think that the league would kick us out either, because ultimately the big six rather don't need the Premier League as much as the Premier League needs the Big Six to be involved. I mean, you think about the top game in the Premier League without them will be Leicester against Everton. That's the top game in the Premier League without the Big Six involved. Think about the viewership levels that are going to tune in for Leicester against Everton in comparison to having those big six. It's going to be ridiculous. It's not sustainable. It's literally not sustainable because those clubs do not have the global market anywhere close to those big six. In fact, the big six teams together would go several hundreds of times over the supporter global bases of the other 14 teams in the league. That's not me insulting them. That's just pure fact. That is just the situation that we're in. Now, what I want to focus on then is the league and that point, because what I'm saying and what the point I'm trying to get to after this long rant is that we are, in my view, still going to be in the Premier League. It's still going to be there. But if this Super League is going on and we're playing in midweek, there's a couple of things that we need to discuss. One of them is that the Premier League basically becomes secondary because you'll rotate to prioritise the Super League. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Or there'll be so much money in those teams that effectively will be able to have two teams of a certain quality that can play in both.
Like Man City.
Like Man City currently do now in the Premier League and in the Champions League because they've got that much money and soon other clubs will catch up with the money that this will bring because the money that we're talking about actually dwarfs the investment of the investors that are already at those clubs. So what the other point is that it removes the competitiveness at different levels of the Premier League. Now we talk about the competitiveness to get into the top half, to get into the top six, to get into the top four, and to win the title. It removes that entirely so that the only two things that people are gunning for in the Premier League is to avoid relegation and to win the title. They're the only two things that you can fight for because there's no more top four. If UEFA tries to do a secondary competition, it will not matter financially. It will not matter in terms of like a social standing. It won't matter because the only thing that will matter is the Super League that's going on in midweek. So Adam, I'll come to you first and then go to the boys after. What's your kind of view around that side of things? The impact that it has on, even if this goes ahead and Arsenal aren't kicked out of the Premier League, does the games for the rest of the season matter? Do the Premier League matches that we've got matter anymore? What is your view around the league side of things?
As a football purist, I'm going to tell you, of course they matter. Of course it matters. We have to watch football because we love the game and we want to see the game played. We want to see good players play against other good players. And I can see it now, us talking about a young boy that comes through and says, but is he good enough to play in the Super League though? Is he Super League quality?
Can you do it on a cold night on a Tuesday?
Yeah, could you do it?
We're going to be the Stoke. Can they do it on a cold night at the Emirates on a Tuesday? We're going to be the Stoke of the Super League. That's the situation. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think there may come a time where maybe you don't necessarily have a second team, but you put out your kids in the Premier League. Whoever thought that would flipping happen? And then you save your big guns for the Super League. But I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of Leicester, Uefa, and I think, what am I going to do to make the Champions League an attractive prospect? And they are either going to have to throw the book at some of the best players. Maybe they'll have to merge some of the clubs to get the best players in one place to try and make that attractive. I don't know what they do, but I think there's going to be something crazy that happens because the more time goes on, is the more I think this looks like it actually might happen. And when news first broke, I didn't think it was going to. But here we are 24 hours later, and it seems like it's genuinely still going through. So, yeah, I think the league will obviously become less competitive because people like to put their eggs in one basket. And I think if you got a game coming up against Real Madrid and you know that's going to earn you a lot of money, and winning it will get you more money, you're not going to risk those players playing against bloody Burnley on a Saturday because, yeah, it's just not sensible.
To me personally, I think the league, if this happens, the league is done, period. I think they just can't say it because it's like talking about the stages of Brexit or coming out of lockdown. There's certain things it's coming, but you can't say it because the PR will be dreadful. The Premiership is dead if this competition goes ahead. There's no ifs, buts, or maybes about it. It's finished. None of it will make any sense anymore. And
the global Carabao Cup.
It will destroy everything. Basically, all the levels down. Like, what will be the point? It's over.
Yeah, no,
Let's be honest. Yeah.
I agree with Tom, and I guess what Adam was saying as well. And I think for me, it doesn't matter if Arsenal and City and Liverpool and the like don't get kicked out. I think they'll just walk on their own accord anyway, because I think the rough math was that, for just as an example, the Super League would earn a club maybe 4 or 5 times what current Champions League gets them, just the Super League. And when that much money is involved, eventually all the TV rights is just going to go to the Super League. So you're not going to get enough money from the Premier League for it to really matter anymore. Or those clubs would view something like Premier League fixtures as the way to give their kids extra match time. Literally, you would start playing academy players in the Premier League, but your actual league de facto in your mind and the way you build your team out would be the Super League. So it's one of those two things. I don't know if the Premier League is going to fold, but it's just not going to matter anymore to the bigger clubs. I think that's just the way it's going to go. I don't think it would take that long for it to happen either. I think we'll just have to look at the numbers behind it. Within 3 years, 4 years, you would see it. I think. I genuinely think that, because really all it takes is 1 or 2 years of this, and all of a sudden Arsenal's debt is completely clean off the books. We're not going to have any anymore. So, yeah, no, I just feel like eventually the clubs will just walk away from the Premier League. I think enough clubs are going to then look at the numbers and say, you know what, kind of what we just discussed before, of even if we don't like it, from a business and financial standpoint, Arsenal has to be in the Super League. From an ownership standpoint, I think enough clubs are going to have that same honest discussion. And I mean, I absolutely love Bundesliga, and I love the additional purity you get from it. But eventually, Bayern will break. Leipzig will break. Leipzig will probably be the first one to jump, because their model, because what we discussed before, their model is not like other Bundesliga clubs. They're more likely to look towards the finances because they're under the Red Bull flag. And I think eventually other clubs will bite. I do think eventually someone like a Dortmund will go, because they are struggling financially. Bayern will eventually want to play against historic European rivals instead of having to absolutely smack Freiburg 6-0 every week. You know, they'd rather go on and play against Bayern. Are built and bred to play against the best and win against the best. So if they don't have that anymore, they're going to want to go where it is. Eventually they will break. And I just think once those things start to happen, I think you will see someone like a Leicester, who their ownership came in and they wanted to challenge the traditional top 6, not become the best club, because the top 6 literally up and left. Like, there's a very, very different thing. And if the money goes to where those clubs went, they will follow the money. That's the natural. Tom can speak about it more than I could, because I'm not an economist, but you go where the money is in business. If the money is there, you go where the money is. If you have any interest on having a successful business model and you want to make money and you want to expand your brand, you're going to go where the money is. And if the money eventually leads to that, that's what's going to happen. So I think for me, the bigger clubs, more so than the 6 that are going, will go. And I think the Premier League will still remain, but it's going to lose its value. It's going to become more like a championship or like a League One, where you're going to have, like, not far, Charlton will come back to the Premier League, but is it really the Premier League anymore? Not really. So, you know.
M. Hobin with the super chat says Premier League would need to move to like an American playoff style system to make the league games mean anything, which makes a lot of sense, obviously, because teams would look at the facts and go, look, I mean, if you're at the top of the table, or if you're nowhere near the top, there's no point even competing anymore, because there's nothing else to play for. So, yeah, that makes 100% sense. But you could also say if someone's at the top of the league and they're nowhere near kind of the cutoff point for the playoffs, then what have they then got to play for ages? They would just play weakened teams because they don't need to win, and then other teams would get an advantage.
They can play for the draft.
That's exactly right. That's why do you think teams here historically trade away their best players at the trade deadline to tank the season, because they know they're going to get the number 1 draft pick next season if they finish last. Yeah. So you're starting to play with that kind of thing.
There's no realistic way to make that system kind of work, because of the corruption. It's not necessarily corruption, but just the loopholes and the exploitation that goes on. Anyway, we've got a ton of questions, as you can probably imagine, that we've got to get through. So I know a lot of your answers have been well thought out and strung out, and I can understand why, guys, because we need the information. But for this section, if we could try and keep our answers as condensed as possible. So, Drew, get your shortening hat on, and we can do this, mate. I believe in you. I trust you. And we're going to start with you just to test you, mate. Zamir says, I'd argue we'd had a better chance of winning the Premier League since there's no consequences in the European Super League. I don't think we will go for it. Why would we really care as long as KSE's pockets are lined?
I don't know how to answer that question. There's like 65 different ways you can tackle it, but I don't think our chances would increase because I feel like we're going to want to focus on being most successful where the most money is. And I think that's kind of how most ownership groups would also want to handle that same scenario. So no, I don't think that's going to necessarily matter. That's probably the only way I could maybe keep it succinct and simple. So yeah, I think we're gonna.
I agree with you.
I think we're gonna focus on the ESL or whatever the hell it's going to be called.
Yeah, I mean, if they're guaranteed, I mean, you can imagine if the money that you're getting for just entering the competition is this amount,
imagine winning it
higher up that table, the money that will be involved with that, which will then again, it will just create another scenario where you widen the gap between the top of the Super League and the bottom of the Super League.
There's one thing that I really want from American sports, and that's the Super Bowl ring. That would be so epic if you get a ring at the end of the season. That is so cool.
Can you imagine, like Kroenke just turns up and he's just got bare hands because Arsenal ain't winning anything. So. Matt G says, will fans stay unhappy if Arsenal start spending 200 million every summer on transfers, Adam?
Give it to me. Give it to me. Unless, of course, Barcelona and Real Madrid are spending 400 million every summer.
Well, that's what would happen, yeah.
Then I'm just going to start complaining. I'm going to say, get Kroenke out again, aren't I? So, yeah.
Invest, Kroenke. Why are you only spending 250 million? Stop spending so little every summer.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's the way it's going to go, isn't it? Tom, the real Janice says, why does the Europa League or the rest of the season even matter?
I think it does because look, I would still want to get a European Cup in our trophy cabinet, so it still matters, right? Any competition we're in, and it's the only competition we're in this season, so we have to go for it. It does matter.
Christopher Fung, Drew says, without even being able to establish a competitive advantage in the current landscape, will we finally pick a direction in the Super League, the Dortmund model or the win now model? I really like this question.
It's a great question. I think it almost kind of goes back to what Adam was just saying. And I guess what both of you were saying. This doesn't mean we're now going to be on par with spending power with other clubs necessarily. It just means that we're going to have access to greater
another shot.
Yeah, it's access to greater yearly revenue. It doesn't mean we're going to become magically more successful. I still think we do need a direction. I don't honestly. I have no idea. I think what would make sense is because of the revenue that this can potentially generate, it would make sense for our spending model to change and try to spend more money. But as you just said, if we spend 200 million and City spends 600 million, we're right back to square one. But in essence, we're still making more money as a club, but not necessarily winning anything. I think that's why I think it's boiled down to this is all about just making as much money as possible, making sure that the investment and stock portfolios are all buffed as much as possible. I don't think it means we think we can go on and win it. I don't think that has anything to do with it. So.
Ed says, is there any proof that the European Super League teams presented a compromised middle ground between the Champions League and the ESL before going nuclear? Ed, the evidence that we've got tells us that no, that's not the case. I mean, you look at the way that the UEFA president's calling out people as effectively snakes. This came completely out of the blue. Agnelli and all of those clubs resigned from the European Club Association basically at the last minute the other night. So no. As far as we're told, and we can piece the kind of puzzle pieces together, there was no negotiation that was public. There was no kind of offers. There was no middle ground. It was a case of the Champions League revamp was what UEFA was going to put forward. And then as soon as the clubs realized that they had an opportunity to break away and not agree to this new Champions League setup and the benefit of having no fans in grounds to protest, they just went for it, and that's what's happened. This is a question for kind of everyone, I suppose. Now, we'll tweak it ever so slightly. David Lincoln says, would you subscribe to a Netflix-style platform if it meant lining their greedy pockets? And what I want to tweak this is to basically to you guys, and it does bleed from the question, is that Arsenal, if this happens, and it looks like it will, are you going to stop? Is this going to anger you so much that you stop supporting Arsenal, that you stop watching Arsenal, that you stop subscribing and stop doing any of that? Is there anyone out of any of us here, anyone in the chat box, that is going to stop doing all of the things that you currently do now to watch Arsenal? Because I'm going to be very honest, and whilst I've been very moany about the whole Super League, I'm not going to stop watching Arsenal. I'm still going to watch Arsenal. I'm still going to put on shows. I'm still going to analyse some Austrian wonder kid that Arsenal are never going to sign. It's still going to happen. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, of course I'm going to watch football, man. I love it. Like, I've loved it since I was a kid. And just because Stan Kroenke has proven that he's a greedy guy, I'm not going to stop supporting Arsenal. I think also the Sky Sports and BT Sports costs were becoming exorbitant. So if there is
you think it's going to be cheaper?
You know what? I actually do. I actually do think it's going to be cheaper because there'll be more people that they can reach. So yeah, I think I can reckon it'll come down to like a £20-30 a month type thing, and I would be more than happy to pay that because I stream every single match illegally now.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry.
What did you say?
Nothing. Didn't say anything.
I was busy doing comments. I didn't even hear what you said.
Then forget about it, Tom. Don't worry. I
don't have any recollection of that comment.
Oh, great. Oh, for goodness sake. What did you say?
Nothing.
Okay. Tom, what do you think?
What was the question again?
Would you stop watching football?
No, hold on. Like, no. I think DAZN was cheekily mentioned. I remember reading something yesterday. I mean, the DAZN model is pretty smart, right? It's like a global platform, like a Netflix for sports, and you subscribe to DAZN and you get everything, all of their content. So boxing, some football games. I think they have something like some rights in Italy for the football, whatever. So I'd imagine it would just fit onto one of these kind of digital tech platforms because also that's where the money's moving these days anyway. So it would probably be like an Amazon, Google, DAZN kind of company who would probably partner with these guys to make it happen. So if you'd pay $10 a month, $20 a month, and you get all the content of all these super teams on your phone direct with all the cool stuff that goes along with it, sign me up. It's definitely not going to be 90 quid a month plus 15 quid for the odd games which aren't shown on telly. So I definitely think the BT and Sky have definitely taken a lot of the fans for granted, although they're all crying on TV today about how much they care about the fans. But 90 quid plus a month is a lot, and I don't imagine with only 15, 20 teams to share the pot across all of Europe and all the world global audience, I think the numbers won't be as high.
True.
No, I mean, I fully agree. I think, as Adam said, the reason why Netflix doesn't cost £100 a month is because how many people have Netflix? They don't need to charge £100 a month. The second that this opens up to a global audience in that ilk, that size and scope, you can make it relatively affordable for most people. £10, £20 a month, or $10, $20. Do you know how many things I have to subscribe to? And easy, I'll just put it in. I have to subscribe to 3 different things to watch matches. Like I'm already paying, $50, $60 a month just to watch football. So, it sucks. And as much as I hate the model, I'm used to having to do it. Because I'm not a local fan, I already rely on subscription services to be able to watch football. Unless I do it through other means, like someone else in this group potentially. But yeah, no. So it's just for me. Like I'm still gonna do it because I think, like all of us, despite we might feel more disconnected with the game when things like this occur, the fact is we all are still connected to the game on some other greater level. That means, despite our reservations, we're gonna want to always watch it. It's always going to be a part of our lives, and to a very large extent. So everyone kind of had the same thought process here when we had to do one subscription after another, and people were really against it. And eventually we all broke. And I think ownership knows that. Owners know that fans will break and fans will pay. And if they lose some fans, there's more fans to be gained. That's the thing. Even if you lose viewership now, the viewership will still grow overall because there's more people that will say, "Oh, I'll just take that person's place," effectively. So they're not going to care about that. So no, I'm not going to stop watching. I'll probably still moan, obviously, but no, I think we all love football too much to not want to watch it, essentially. So.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you. I think it's just going to be a case where we're all going to do what we need to do to keep watching it. It's more down to kind of, it's not even about like the whole, because obviously we talk about how much people are paying at the moment. It's ridiculous. And it might be come down to one package. And I said for ages, I don't know why the Premier League doesn't start its own streaming service. I don't know why it's not done this for a long, long time, because it would make a hell of a lot more money. It would have more control over the rights of it as well. And that was one of the things I wanted to pick up on. I know I'm hijacking question section, so I apologise profusely, guys. You will get more questions in before the end. We've still got 15 minutes left. But have you? I'm sure you've seen like Gary Neville and people on these different, like Sky and BT, absolutely going in on these clubs and having a go about how it's ruining the sanctity of the game and it's against the fans, whilst at the same time working for the companies that have scheduled games at awful times for fans, that have not considered the fans when making those decisions, and have obviously charging fans a hell of a lot of money, so that some individuals go off and do things that they shouldn't. Not naming any names. But do you know what I mean, Drew? Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't know. Like, it sucks now because I mean, I've been enjoying the conversation, even though it's been like a dire topic. But now I'm just kind of getting annoyed the more I think about it, because I think the one thing that's always appealed to a lot of fans, maybe not even just people in the States, is that again, I think football is kind of pure. And I think now you're seeing the players that have spoken out about it have all alluded to the fact that football is kind of a pure. There's a purist romanticization about football, that when things like this kind of happen, it loses that luster. So I think for now, I'm kind of like thinking back about all those kind of things, and I'll try to link it to the chat. Someone I write and podcast with at Yama, Luke, he gave like a 2-minute voice clip about when we played Ludogorets. There was I forget his name, but the player who they had to get past Steaua Bucharest to get into the competition, and had the keeper sent off, and the field player that had to go into goal for the penalty shootout and score just penned and save too. He was the player that Ludogorets got from Steaua's biggest rival, and then they ended up helping knock out Steaua from the competition. You're not going to see that anymore if football keeps going this direction. So it's kind of like it's a weird. Now I'm like this weird, like nostalgic kind of thought process about like what this means moving forward for the game. So it's
I was actually going to jump on the back of that, actually, because as much as I'm getting all excited about being part of the super intergalactic league that we're about to join, what on earth does that mean for youth football? Will you get another Bukayo Saka?
I think someone actually asked the question earlier on in the chat box. They're saying what will happen through that, because I mean, maybe the Premier League will get used to blood the youngsters. that's what we're going to use it for. And I'm not even kidding.
Could we buy another club like Watford, right?
We're going to get Red Bull Arsenal. That's what we're going to do.
Arsenal B team. No, but seriously, because I mean, I have to be honest with you. Like, as much as I'm laughing and joking about it now, what keeps me connected to Arsenal, and I'll be like, I probably could have switched off Arsenal this year, given how bad we were. If it wasn't for Emil Smith Rowe and Saka, I probably wouldn't be watching games. I have to be honest. Like, I think it got so bad at that point because obviously we're also passionate about the club, and seeing the young players come through, despite all the money and all the billions, all the hundreds of thousands of pounds we throw to the Obbers and the Ozils, seeing Saka come through and one of our own, and it reminds us of the old days, you know, when the FA Cup meant something, and when those, you know, obviously we maybe come from a different generation than some of the younger fans, but when the games actually meant something. So those guys kind of ground me or ground us as fans, because they bring us back to what football is all about, you know, playing for your local club, realizing that dream like we all had to play for our club. And I think, yeah, those guys keep me going. And when we don't have one of those guys around and we're not performing, I kind of get disenfranchised. So I do wonder if we have all the money in the world and we're buying the Mbappes and Neymar, 2.0s and whatever, and we don't get that local London lad or that local Croydon lad or Essex lad who's playing for the club, what that would actually mean. And would we, say, 5-10 years down the line, have the same passion for the club when it is basically unrecognizable from the community where it came?
If I'm honest, I think a smart businessman utilizes the youth even more. Number one, because as you alluded to, we all love that kind of success story. We love the fact that Bukayo Saka's come through the ranks, is now playing for Arsenal, and has at times carried this team on his back. So I think that is a nice
all season.
I think that is a nice story that would allow you, and a beautiful narrative that would allow you to sell more merchandise, that type of stuff. But also, I think Chelsea have been fantastic at doing this, is using the loan system as like another revenue stream. So if you develop all these kids and you have a bloated youth squad, you can then start selling them to I don't know, the Watfords, the Norwiches, all those guys, and I don't know, maybe
they won't have any money.
Sorry, say that again.
Those clubs don't exist anymore, Adam.
They're
done.
Well, basically, you're going to have the Premiership, well, the the ESL, and then basically League Two. That's what's going to happen.
See,
in terms of like the chasm between the money between the two clubs.
They said that they are going to put more money in the pockets of the football pyramid than
they say that now.
UEFA. I'm choosing to believe them. And I'm guessing you guys are.
Here's the wall and it's going over your eyes, Adam.
The thing is, let's be honest, right? Right now, they have a way to rewrite football where it's more fair, grassroots, everything, But let's be honest, look at the guys behind it. So all of this is not conducive to making more money. But they don't care. So if they don't care like we do. So as much as we'd want, they're going to support. If they don't write the rules, and remember, these guys are writing their own rules. They're not going to be they're going to be like the NFL Commission. They will write their own rules, their own constitution. So they're not going to have a governing body telling them what to do anymore. So why would they want to support the Brentfords and the Leicesters and the West Hams? There's no incentive for them to do it whatsoever.
Yeah, and you have to remember that we're talking about owners who, like for example, Kroenke owns an MLS franchise, and MLS does little to nothing to support football clubs in the United States that aren't in the MLS. A lot of those clubs go default. They have to rely on local communities for things like sponsorship or revenue or money. Kroenke isn't sitting there helping out smaller clubs in Colorado. He barely helps out the Rapids, but that's because the Rapids are an awful franchise to begin with. But that's besides the point. But I don't know. I kind of feel like the issue with what you were saying with Chelsea's model when it comes to selling youth as revenue, there's so much money in this new idea that you don't need to sell youth for money anymore. Mm-hmm. They can completely abandon that whole philosophy, and they can just rely on the money and the finishing prices and the sponsorship and the revenue from how much money that can potentially be in the European Super League. That
also
what we know of transfers could become irrelevant. You know what I mean? So you go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, because they are all in bed with each other, they could also set wage caps and transfer caps. So they could say, well, for anyone who's a non-whatever league player, we don't want to spend more than 10 million. They can do whatever they want. There's no body telling them what to do.
Yeah,
so there won't be that kind of drain of like how we kind of cherry pick league players from the French league. If they don't want to do that, they don't have to.
That in itself, though, is going to breed conflict because they're in control. As soon as some clubs start, and I can imagine that we'll probably be one of them. As soon as some of these clubs start finishing near the bottom and things start widening because the teams at the top are earning a lot more money from where they're finishing. Because I mean, Arsenal are starting on a very much lower level with the club, the squad that they have, unless they start to invest heavily in this summer, next summer, whatever. Unless that starts to change, whether clubs will even sell to ESL clubs, we don't even know if that's going to be the case. And I imagine if you know you're selling to an ESL club, you're going to hike the price up of your players like crazy. So you've got to factor that in. Obviously, players are going to want to move to these clubs to be involved with it, but the club's if you're under contract, the ball is not in your court. It's definitely in the court of the selling club. So that's going to be a really, really big problem, is that the clubs, eventually there'll be growing conflict because they'll realize that the rules that are in place are only benefiting those top teams. And all it will take is for one club to turn around and go, I've had enough of this. I don't want to do it anymore, and drop out. And the whole thing could come crashing down. And that's in itself, by the clubs running it and it not being run by an independent body, makes it very vulnerable and unstable in itself to it collapsing. Because at the end of the day, whilst they talk about the fact that we're doing everything we can for the footballing pyramid, and of course they still are focusing on maximising revenue, the owner's main interest is their own pockets and how they're going to make that through their own club. And if their club is suffering in comparison to the others, that will start to create tension and conflict.
So you really don't believe they're going to do anything good for the football pyramid at all?
Not if they don't have to.
Did you hear that what Kaveh Soliko on Sky said today? Have you seen his quote where he said basically that their primary objective is to maximise the revenues of their club, and that the overall view of football, the overall beneficiary of football as a sport, is secondary to that. That tells you everything.
But the thing is, this is what I think, that it would almost inevitably end up in a draft system of sorts, right? Because why, if you're making, say these clubs now start to make $500 million or $1 billion every year each or whatever, why do they need to spend on transfer wages to teams not in the club? Like they have all the collective buying power now. So I just think that they can say, we're not going to spend more than 10 million on any transfer. And what do the clubs outside it say? Because they won't have the money to compete, even with 10 million maybe, or 20 million. So they will have all the power and all the money. And then if they do have all the money, then why should it all be spent on salaries and transfer fees? And instead it just goes, so you get rid of the transfer fee or try and reduce it, and the rest just goes on salaries and into the owner's pockets. Why would there now be all of that money going into smaller clubs when you don't really need to? I mean, it's really a massive power grab. These guys will, if you're in, you're in. If you're out, just forget about it. And like I said, there's no governing body who supersedes them or can tell them what to do. So I also, that trickle down economics is absolute nonsense. They will keep all of that money direct. Can you imagine Kroenke getting an extra 300-400 million quid and he's going to spend it on transfers?
What's he going to do? Buy another ranch with it?
Exactly.
Yeah. The thing is that maybe for a competition that could have really done good things for Arsenal, as you pointed out, we've got the wrong owner for it.
Real fast, it like you guys are saying, it benefits owners to not help the pyramid, because then you get the pyramid's best players. It makes more sense to have fewer clubs in existence or able to sustain that level of footballing ability, because then you can have it for yourself. There's no reason why you should help out. Essentially, there's no reason to buff up your competitor. The whole if you're splitting off and you're trying to form your own league, whether if it's a sub competition or you're trying to make it an actual league, like we were maybe discussing earlier, you're viewing any other league as a competitor. And in the business world, you want to kill off your competitor, right? So it's no different than if you start your own business, whatever corporate firm, and you see this one talented person at this one business, you want to poach that person from that business because you want to put that other entity, they're your competitor, right? So the whole reason you're going to take their best and brightest. Right, so you're looking at, that's what I mean before, is that I think you have to look at transfers very, very differently if this comes off or gets as big as to maybe the potential is there. This is very much, you have to look at this from a corporate standpoint. if you look at it from a corporate standpoint, you will see what can potentially happen. I'm not saying it's going to, because we don't know what's going to happen, right? What other mitigating factors can go on. But if you look at it from a corporate lens, you'll see what could happen. And what we have seen happen, mom and pop stores always go out of business because they lose whatever it is to bigger entities that they can't compete with eventually. And you're going to end up seeing that. So, yeah,
it's a really uncertain time. It's one that we don't really know what's going to happen, what the potential of it can be. I was going to say it's exciting, but it's not exciting at all.
I was actually thinking of just one other point, because even if you put a quota on homegrown players, what if you're not one of you're a country which doesn't have one of the clubs, like Ajax, for example? So is it fair that just because you're in London, you then have a choice of 3 clubs, for example? That's not fair. So they probably won't put that restriction in place.
No.
So then so when you think about it, it's like, that homegrown thing will probably be thrown out as well. But you can then just basically get in all the best talent from all over the world, regardless of passports, language, whatever. I think everything's up for grabs now.
Yeah. It's going to be oh man, it's going to be crazy times seeing where this goes. The end of the season I was already looking forward to the end of the season. With this in place, it's like nothing even matters at all as much in regards to league football and football in general. So we'll see what happens. We'll see where it goes. I'm sure more news is going to break out from this too. So we'll just have to keep our ears to the ground and eyes to the television screens. But thank you, Hoban, for the super chat. He says in 10 years, it will be the only main league in Europe and expanded to 36 teams. It will be like the NFL and the NBA. I can see it gradually expanding more and more and more as more teams come on board with it. And eventually it will turn into like a European Premier League with lots of different divisions underneath it. And it will just be basically a whole European table, and Arsenal will be in League 3. So we can't wait for that. We can't wait. Anyway, we're going to wrap things up there. We've covered a hell of a lot on today's show. And it's been a fantastic kind of insight into your guys' thoughts, especially you guys have been brilliant as panelists. You've been informative. You've been in some cases too revealing, which has been really great. And we appreciate it. But thank you so much for listening in, people. We always appreciate you guys in the chat box, dropping a like on the video, subscribing, giving everyone a follow. First of all, let me thank Tom. Really appreciate your time, mate. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I can't believe we got through 90 minutes without talking about Jose Mourinho.
We didn't. That's very true. Yeah, if there's one man that could take the steam away from the Super League, it would be him. So fair play to that man. Yeah. I mean, I can't believe the amount of people that bought the story about he left because of the Super League. How many people bought into that? That turned out to be.
How many times has he been sacked now?
Oh, I've lost count. I mean, he's failed at 3 English clubs. So he's the famous 3 fingers as he pulled up in the press conference is now the amount of times he's been sacked by an English club. Actually, that's true. That's wrong. It's 4 times, is it not? Because he was at Chelsea twice. So did he get sacked twice? So it's 4 times. Unbelievable scene. There you go. Thank you as well to Drew, mate. Really appreciate your time as always. Good to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me back as always, and good chat with the guys. It was ironically, it's a depressing topic, but it's probably one of my favorite podcasts we've ever done. So
there you go. It's good chat, good discussion. Make sure I hope you've appreciated it too in the chat box for dropping a like on the video. And finally, Adam, appreciate your time, son. Don't get woken up in the middle of the night by a knock at the door. I'm sure it'll be fine. Don't answer it. You'll be fine, mate. But appreciate your time. Tell people where they can find you.
Yep, at TFO Show and the Football Terrace.
I shouldn't have told people where they can find you. Don't tell people where they can find you. We got to avoid that as much as possible. You can find Drew at Logic Lara on Twitter, and you can find Tomo at Quantum_King on Twitter as well. You can find us at the Gooner Talk TV and myself at Tom Canton Media. Trust me, there's going to be plenty more Super League content coming out of the channel and at 101 Great Goals as well as the content continues. I mean, I'm gonna have to get like a template template done up where I can just press Control and something, and Super League pops up on my screen, because it's just going to save me a hell of a lot of time. Really appreciate your time you spent watching the show, guys. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'll be joined by Mike at 5 p.m. UK time for a Let's Talk Arsenal. I can't imagine what we're going to talk about. Something I imagine will pop up between now and then. But we'll see you again very, very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.